Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
So, Summer Workshop 25. I've seen this abbreviation all over in the material, and it's made me think about the significance for me of that 25, because this is indeed the 25th anniversary of my involvement with the foundation. 25 years ago, on a very cold Boston winter night, in 2000, David Gallis, fellow director and future chair of the board, met me for my second Hertz interview. And like so many, if not all fellows, I walked away from that interview deflated and elated. Deflated because I had utterly failed to provide anything resembling a cogent answer to his question, how would you measure quantum behavior or effects in a protein? And to this day, I have no idea what came out of my mouth. But elated because it was not the interrogation that I was expecting, but a singularly thought-provoking conversation. And that's why we're here. That's why we're all here, because we love these conversations. Because, oh, sorry, there's David. As Anna Soper said to me when we happened to overlap at Stanford several weeks ago playing chamber music, there's Anna playing her viola, any Hertz gathering is a chance to access broad topics outside your field, to really talk to everyone about anything. I was in fact standing in the line for dinner in the buffet, overhearing conversations between people just, while they're getting food. And I thought this must be the only place where you are as likely to hear eigenvalue as stem cell when you're listening to people talk. And that's what I'm up here to do, not to end this workshop, not to provide some kind of grand finale to the proceedings, but to hopefully start more conversations, to take us not only through the rest of the night, but into imagining the future of the community. Because as an academic in graduate education, as a volunteer fortunate enough to have devoted my energy to working with and for fellows for over 20 years, I've devoted those energies to the questions of what people can become, what organizations and systems can become. And that's no more pertinent than now in a quickly and dramatically changing landscape for federal research funding and so much else that impacts STEM and STEM education. So, in the grand tradition of Hertz, I'm going to present you with some challenges. Don't worry, after all this sitting around and drinking and eating, I'm going to warm you up to that task. So for those of you who are interested and able, I invite you to get up out of your seats, get a nice good stretch, and while you're doing that, let your mind range freely so that you can answer this word association question. I say community, and you think just... Okay, let's try this again. I should have known that, unlike the med students in my lectures, it would not require any, provoking or probing to get anybody to talk here. So one at a time, please. What? Anyone? Oh, now nobody. Great. Okay, it was all or none. What is this? Dichotomy. We learned how dichotomies don't operate anymore. Wait, yes, go ahead. People. Okay. Anyone? Friends. Anyone?
My roommate.
Support? Roommates. Okay.
Microbes.
Right. Yes, microbes. Okay. Purpose. Okay. Serendipity. Okay, all good. So now we're going to change it up a little bit. I say Hertz community. Now what do you think of?
Eigenvalue.
Stem cell. No, I was kidding. Friends. Connection. Excitement.
Impact.
Inspiration, I heard? Leadership. Impact. I like that one. Sorry, I missed one. Interesting conversation, for sure. That's all great. Thank you very much. You may remain standing or sit. To be honest, if you want to roam around, that's also fine. I'm serious, because at conferences, you'll usually find me pacing in the back, because I just can't stand sitting. So whatever you want to do, it's fine with me. If you're pacing, I won't be bothered. So those words, which I really love, I love the enthusiasm. I can always depend on enthusiasm. I should have known, I prepared. I was ready to name call people. I even asked Anne for table map and everything. I should have known that was totally unnecessary. So all these words speak to our experiences, past and present in the community, the Hertz community. And they also speak to our values, what endures and what carries us into the future. And the question is, what does that future mean for the Hertz community? So my daughter, Maria, was, I believe, one of the first babies to receive a Future Fellow onesie. This is from the 2019 Board Council meeting, and I think this is probably the last event that I ever attended in person until this workshop, which is also the first summer workshop that I've ever attended. And going back to this moment in 2019 makes me think, what do I want the community to look like when she is of age to apply for the fellowship? And this is the challenge that I bring to all of you. What do you think? What do you want the community to look like in 2040? What should we be doing, and what challenges should we have taken on? But in truth, the community has long been grappling with these questions from the moment it began. As Neil Tanner alluded to last night when he mentioned the first retreat, the 25 years that I've been engaged with the foundation overlap exactly with the birth, growth, and evolution of the Hertz community. Before the 2000s, as some of you in this audience know all too well, fellows could go through their entire fellowship without meeting a single other fellow. As all the post-2000 fellows go. So one of the continuing wonders of this summer workshop, I'm going to Ray saying that it fulfills its purpose, is how it grows the community, now by bringing on board newly minted fellows and also bringing those earlier fellows into the community. And it's important to me to recognize what that community has been created on, a foundation of fellows that was built between 1963, when the graduate fellowship started, and 2003, by the hard efforts of other fellows as interviewers and by dint of the very special selection process. So here's a timeline of those 25 years. Here are the major milestones for the foundation and the community in that time. And here is my own Hertz timeline overlaid on that. And I want to acknowledge that in this timeline are many, many essential people who enabled these changes, the momentous evolution of the foundation and the fellowship experience, the people who advocated for all the roles that I have been able to take on. And I want to thank them collectively. Sadly, I won't have the time to name them all and to tell all those stories. But most importantly for tonight, of course, I want to acknowledge David Gallas for suggesting me for the committee that recruited Robbie. At that time, there were very natural questions about her candidacy. In contrast to all past presidents, she isn't a scientist. But in the foundation, we're all about recognizing out-of-the-box solutions, and Robbie was the leader we needed. I want to thank her for taking on the challenge of leading Hertz with vision, drive, professionalism, and charisma. Advocating for her was one of the most impactful things I've done with the foundation, and so of course it has particularly special meaning to me to receive the inaugural award in her honor. Even more, I look forward to recognizing future recipients who embody the leadership values that she championed as president. She also exemplifies how the community includes not only fellows, but all those who support them, the staff, friends, family, and partners. There are so many opportunities taken, challenges faced, so much joy and satisfaction represented in this timeline. And so I hope to start conversations, as I set out at the beginning of my talk, by pulling out just a few stories from my time behind the curtain, as Anne puts it, moments that I come back to again and again when I think about what the Hertz community means to me. I asked you to free associate around Hertz community, and I heard exactly the two words. I should have also known that I didn't need to bring my own words to it. They might come out of that exercise. The most important words to me are leadership and impact. So for leadership, starting with the first retreat ever, over here, 2004, it was not until my second year in grad school that I personally ever met another fellow. And that was at the birthday celebration for Edward Teller in 2003. And maybe it was at that same event that Jeff Gore, also a 2000 fellow, he took his fellowship at Berkeley, and now he's a professor at MIT. And maybe that was when he also felt what I call as a chemist, the proximity effect, that something special is created and accelerated when you put fellows in a room together. Jeff went on to organize that first retreat the next year in September of 2004 at Point Reyes, California. And there's Jeff at the retreat with me. So remember that engineering challenge that you all participated in yesterday? So that's how it was going. I stopped in to take some pictures. And this is how it all started. Thanks to John Ohab and Anne, I identified this photo evidence of the first ever engineering challenge. Yes, almost archaeological at this point. And as you see, in a fortuitous coincidence, it was also a tower. Although I think the challenge was it simply had to withstand its own weight. But you see that the materials were somewhat limited. So the thin spaghetti, you can't really do much. But the point was to get it as high as possible. It was a truly brilliant stroke of Jeff's to use a challenge to unite fellows who love having purpose. And his insight is a tradition that we have continued to honor for over 20 years now. And that is the origin of the community, the genesis of programming for fellows, led by fellows. The realization that if you have a bunch of creative, hyper-articulate, intellectually voracious people, you should just put them together and stand back. And that's all it took for me. I was hooked on this vibe from the very first retreat and hooked on helping to nurture it. So I co-organized the second West Coast retreat. And many others that you see in this room and that you see at Hertz events continue to serve to this day on the board, on the council, on committees. People like Cameron Geddes and Neil Tanner, also from the first retreat, like Shannon Yee and Dan Schlichter, who are my partners in crime from those early days. Because in particular, Cameron, Neil, and I experienced firsthand the difference between the fellowship with community and it without. And so we have been committed to guaranteeing its future ever since. In fact, when asked to describe the community's impact on him personally, Shannon's reply was, "It changed my life. It is the professional community I want to see succeed the most." And so that is another challenge to you all. What will you do to ensure the future success of the community? I said I was hooked, and I guess that was clear to others around me, who then advocated for me to take on additional roles. So Susan Overman, there in the right corner, who was Vice President of Communications and Development when I was a fellow, Wendy Cieslak, a fellow and board member, and David Gallas again, all recommended me, along with Phil Walkoff, to join the board in 2010. Now, at that time, I was a very freshly minted assistant professor with arguably no relevant experience for serving on the board of a foundation. Over time, I found on the board role models for what a leader should be, with impacts for how I act in my job and as an academic and across my life. I deeply, deeply appreciate the people who said important and sometimes very difficult things when they needed to be said, in ways that were sure to be heard without being confrontational, in other words, productively. People like Wendy Cieslak, who was an early champion for diversity and for mentoring of fellows. People like Stephen Fantone and Carl Burns, who luckily for us went on to take even more significant leadership roles as chairs of the board and council. But when I started as director in 2010, all I really had to recommend me was a lot of ground level experience with fellows and a possibly helpful large dose of naivete. The board had given me a seat at the table, and I figured, okay, when the moment came, I would use my perspective and voice it. Then, during a break at my first board meeting, Greg Canavan took me aside and said in that quiet drawl of his, "Thank you for speaking up." And the thought entered my mind for really the very, very first time, was I not supposed to? But I know that his gratitude was real, and that is also what makes volunteering with Hertz so rewarding, why I and my partners in crime keep coming back. Because if you step up, your contribution will be valued. And that leads me to that other keyword, impact, a word you've heard tonight, and that you've heard throughout this workshop for a reason, because it resonates across everything the foundation does, the fellowship does, the fellows do, and that the community does. The same year that I joined the board, 2010, Tom Weaver, then senior interviewer, trained me as an interviewer. Ooh, initially, my overriding impression was that it was like being interviewed for the fellowship all over again, only much worse, because this time I definitely was supposed to know all the answers, and I had to do it 6 times in a row. But Tom was very encouraging, and thanks to that, I began to see my impact as a chemist and biologist in the selection process as the foundation continued to expand its definition of the application of physical sciences. And as with being on the board, I really valued what other interviewers taught me about exploring potential, truly wonderfully thoughtful interviewers like Dan Goodman. And I can only say, if you ever have the chance, interview with Dan, because it is a life lesson in bringing out the best in someone with creativity and compassion. Unfortunately, once my husband and I started a family, I had increasingly little bandwidth to spare, like none, and I had to admit that I couldn't serve in the way that I had before in the foundation, and that felt, sadly, like the end of my impact. When Philip asked me, they ask me every year, but when Philip asked me in 2021 to interview again after a 5-year hiatus, I was like just, frank with him. I was kind of feeling very badly about how little I was doing with the foundation at that time. And I said, come on, Philip. I've been out of highly technical fields for ages. I'm totally out of practice. I'm really not up to it. And he said, no, Jessica, you can do it. I trust you to recognize what the foundation is looking for in a future fellow. And I am so grateful to him for that vote of confidence, because participating in selection as an interviewer, as all of you volunteer interviewers know, is a thrill. And that has kept me connected with the foundation in such a meaningful way. I also want to speak to how the foundation not only welcomes all efforts to have impact, but also gives them the freedom to fail. I mentioned Wendy Cieslak as an early champion for mentoring, and that traces all the way back to just before she joined the board in 2008, and also at that time assembled a working group to address a potential so-called network, for success, initially focused on the needs of women in STEM, but with recognition from the beginning that any such initiative would benefit all fellows. Such a critical idea that she had to leverage the depth and breadth of the community to create you can well imagine, a unique network of fellows as mentors. We tried to build out from that initiative, from that initial focus group several times. And although there have been some individual successes in mentor and mentee pairs, for example, I had the privilege to mentor Rebecca Alford during her fellowship, and have so enjoyed catching up with her here. I feel really privileged that I got to see her. Actually, we had done that all during the pandemic, so I'd never met her before. So it's really, really nice to see her in person. It's been true for several people here. But I would say, quite honestly, we have not been successful at building something sustained and sustainable in the mentoring regime. But like the ARPA-H breakout session that Jen Roberts led, Jen Roberts led yesterday, we are keeping at those Heil-Meyer questions, recognizing comprehensive fellow mentoring as an important challenge, noting the limitations of what we've already tried, and pushing ourselves to find better solutions to realize that impact for the fellows. In other words, your ideas are always welcome, and if the time isn't right for them now, even if you try and fail, if the value proposition is strong, you will have the chance to bring them back. Just as interviewers who champion applicants in the selection process are so essential to bringing forward fellows, volunteers who champion ideas for the community are at the heart of our ability to evolve and meet the needs of fellows, as recognized last night with the Ray and Sydney Volunteer Award for Leadership Award to Ruby Lai. To summarize my time with Hertz, I'll just trace how the Foundation's commitment to supporting volunteers has given me such a rewarding continuity, as illustrated through my activities as an interviewer. So Vernon Beck interviewed me in my first round in 2000. 15 years later, I found myself doing first-round interviews with him. Carol Burns and I interviewed Ian MacKay in 2014. He became a fellow, and this January, I got to interview with him. David Van Velen and I interviewed Maddie Urbanek in 2023. She became a fellow, and as we all know, gave a Fellows Showcase talk just yesterday morning. And I interviewed Reuben Saunders in 2016. He became a fellow, and just this month, he was announced as the Hertz Thesis Prize winner, and also gave a talk today at lunch. I hope that my experiences, as I've illustrated them here, show that there are so many different ways and on so many different scales that we can each contribute, lead, and have impact. So I'll send you off into the rest of the evening by reiterating my challenges to you. What does the community of the future look like? What does this community do for fellows? How does it address critical challenges that you foresee fellows facing? I hope you'll help us capture your answers by dropping them into the mosaic that has been hanging out in the conference space and is now located here in the back corner. I hope you'll round out the night by engaging with one another about those ideas. And I hope you'll have many more conversations in the future about the future to help us realize the potential of fellows and maximize their impact to the community. So I thank you for all for a really memorable several days here and for a truly exceptional 25 years. So let's all raise a toast to the next 25 years and beyond of the Hertz community. Thank you very much.